For your convenience, I am monitored to respond to the name Robby.
He might look a little clunky, but Robby is one of the most important robots in cinema history. Because today, as Silicon Valley grapples with AI safety, they are trying to solve a problem that Hollywood already fixed 70 years ago. This is the story of the robot that got AI right. Released in 1956, the very same year the field of artificial intelligence was born, Forbidden Planet changed the way that science fiction movies were made. Before Forbidden Planet, science fiction films in Hollywood were generally speaking quite low budget affairs, filmed in black and white, featuring monsters in rubber suits. But this film was different. MGM decided to bet the house on legitimising the genre, throwing an A-list budget at a sci-fi script for the very first time. And although it didn't make a lot of money at the box office, it was hugely influential, even inspiring Gene Roddenberry to create Star Trek 10 years later. With that big budget of $1.9 million, they could afford to shoot in widescreen CinemaScope rather than a boxy 4x3 frame and cutting-edge Eastman colour, which together with lush matte painted backgrounds made the alien world of Altair 4 feel vast and immersive.
Look at the color of that sky.
Yeah, but I'll still take blue.
I don't know. I think a man could get used to this.
They brought in animators on loan from Walt Disney for the visual effects, and even commissioned the first entirely electronic musical score in cinematic history. At the centre of this $2 million gamble by the studio was a single prop that cost more than a staggering $100,000 to build, around 7% of the total production budget. His name, of course, was Robby the Robot.
He's your cook, too?
Even manufactures the raw materials. Down here, there's a small built-in chemical laboratory where he analyzes it. Later, he can reproduce identical molecules in any shape or quantity.
That's a housewife's dream.
Unlike the doomsday machines audiences were used to, Robby was something completely different. The ultimate high-end household appliance, which for an audience in 1956 made perfect sense.
This is the kitchen of tomorrow, a press-button dream coming true for Mrs. Housewife.
During the early 1950s, technology meant one thing, the atomic bomb. But by 1956, the post-war economic boom was at its absolute peak. The nation's GDP had practically doubled in just 10 years. Fueled by the GI Bill for returning servicemen giving them low-interest loans, a newly minted middle class was buying up millions of mass-produced homes in the rapidly expanding suburbs. They suddenly had unprecedented disposable income, and they were utterly obsessed with filling those new homes with convenience.
That's easy. With my Frigidaire cold pantry.
This was the golden age of the consumer appliance. It was defined by an explosion of automatic washing machines, dishwashers, electric ovens, and televisions. For the first time in history, the public was genuinely falling in love with machines. So Robby was designed to be the ultimate luxury appliance. And fittingly enough, the man hired to design him had just exactly the right background for the job.
Then the war ended and we got into wash machines. A lot of the people who were in plastics just didn't know how to do a lot of the molding that I got into, pressure molding and vacuum molding.
While the MGM art department had already produced dozens of early concept sketches, it was Robert Kinoshita, a former washing machine engineer, who finally brought the design over the finish line.
They weren't accepting any of our designs. There were about 3 or 4 of us making a lot of sketches until one day I said, to hell with this, I'm going to make my model. So I made a miniature, about that big, the latest design I like. And art director Lonigan came in, he says, hey, I like that, let me have that. So he grabs it and runs, I mean runs. So he ran into the producer's office, and about 10 minutes later he comes running back. He says, draw it.
But while Kinoshita was in California building the body of the future, a very different group of visionaries were gathering 3,000 miles away on the East Coast to invent its mind. Dartmouth College, New Hampshire, the birthplace of artificial intelligence. In the summer of 1956, a team of mathematicians and scientists, led by John McCarthy, organised a legendary workshop. Their belief was that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can be in principle so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. Up until this point, the field of thinking machines had been dominated by the term cybernetics, a label championed by the mathematician Norbert Wiener at MIT. But there was a problem. Wiener had a notoriously difficult personality. He would famously snore loudly through other people's presentations, only to wake up at the very end and ask awkward questions. McCarthy had no interest in involving him. He later admitted he didn't want to accept Wiener as a guru, nor did he want to argue with him. He needed a clean break, a new brand name. So, in the proposal for the workshop, McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence. Funnily enough, he didn't particularly care for the name, and it was a choice he would later come to regret. He spent years trying to explain that he didn't mean artificial as in fake, like artificial flowers. He meant it as in synthetic, like a man-made diamond. He was describing a real intelligence created by engineering, but the public heard fake and the name stuck.
I started my work on artificial intelligence in about '56, although I became really interested in before that in '49 when I was a beginning graduate student in mathematics. It might take 500 years before we have computer programs that are as intelligent as human beings. Now, I'd be inclined to bet on something like 50, although very exceedingly unlikely that I'll be around.
While McCarthy was just beginning to theorise about artificial intelligence, Forbidden Planet was already showing it to audiences. But the movie went one crucial step further. It showed us how to make it safe.
Robby is simply a tool. Tremendously strong, of course. He could quite easily topple this house off its foundation.
In the wrong hands, mightn't such a tool become a deadly weapon?
The writers understood that if you build a machine that is stronger and smarter than a human, then you are immediately faced with a problem. How do you control it? And to solve that problem, they turned to a concept invented by a young writer named Isaac Asimov. By 1956, Asimov was just 36 years old, but he was already a titan of the genre. By day, he was a biochemistry associate professor at Boston University, but in his spare time, he was effectively rewriting the rulebook of science fiction. You see, Asimov had grown up reading pulp magazines in his father's candy store, and there was one specific trope he absolutely detested.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
He called it the Frankenstein complex, the lazy idea that a robot must always be a monster that inevitably turns on its creator. Asimov looked at this like a scientist. He argued that robots, like any other technology, should be built with safety features. So, in a series of short stories from the early 1940s, later collected in his foundational text I, Robot, he introduced a safety protocol that changed everything.
Dr. Isaac Asimov, professor of biochemistry at Boston Medical School and a leading science fiction writer, has written a great deal about the sociological implications of robots. He has formulated laws for their behavior. He calls them the 3 laws of robotics.
The first law is as follows. A robot may not harm a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, a robot must obey orders given it by qualified personnel unless those orders violate rule number 1. In other words, a robot can't be ordered to kill a human being. Rule number 3, a robot must protect its own existence. After all, it's an expensive piece of equipment. Unless that violates rules 1 or 2. A robot must cheerfully go into self-destruction if it is in order to follow an order or to save a human life.
Aim right between the eyes. Fire. You see, he's helpless, locked in a sub-electronic dilemma between my direct orders and his basic inhibitions against harming rational beings. Cancelled.
Robby is the first major Hollywood robot clearly influenced by Asimov's safety logic principles, even though the film never explicitly names the 3 laws. But back in the real world of 1956, there was another striking coincidence in the field of robotics, because while Hollywood was releasing the ultimate robot butler, 2 engineers named Joseph Engelberger and George Davol were meeting at a cocktail party to form the world's very first robotics company, Unimation.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
The way Robby is portrayed in the movie is of course way more advanced than could be achieved at the time. In fact, MGM heavily marketed Robby the Robot as a real sentient and functional entity.
These, his ears, tuned in all directions to receive the slightest sound. And this is his brain.
But in reality, Robby the Robot was still just a very sophisticated man in a suit. A man by the name of Frankie Darrow. Darrow was a 5'3" character actor chosen specifically because of his height, as he could fit inside Kinoshita's design. But the production was far from smooth. Darrow, who was known to enjoy a somewhat enthusiastic liquid lunch, became a liability.
Darrow was inside and was a little bit tippily, and he damn near fell over and almost broke the thing. But somebody else came in and replaced him.
Legend has it that after one particularly heavy session of martinis, he nearly toppled the $100,000 prop over. The studio wasn't taking any chances, and Darrow was fired on the spot. Despite the sweating human inside, the suit itself was a marvel of engineering. Kinoshita built Robby using royalite, a type of aircraft-grade plastic used for making suitcases, which was vacuum formed into those iconic curves. He crammed the head with a dizzying array of electrical wiring to power the spinning gyroscopes, the cooling fans, and those famous saxophone valves under his chin. The result was a prop that looked both futuristic and expensive, worthy of the character it was meant to represent. After Forbidden Planet, Robby became a pop culture celebrity. He appeared in The Twilight Zone, Columbo, and even Mork and Mindy, amongst many others. The most sophisticated prop in MGM's history became a Rent-A-Robot, a toy for comedy writers. But while Hollywood may have forgotten what made Robby special, the meaning of Forbidden Planet remained. And if you look very closely at the film's ending, you realise that with respect to artificial intelligence, Robby was the only one who got it right. The tragedy of Forbidden Planet is about a race called the Krell. The Krell were a civilization infinitely more intelligent than humans. They achieved the ultimate goal of technology, a machine that could create anything they could imagine instantly by pure thought. But they made one fatal mistake. They built a system with infinite power but no safety rails. They forgot about Asimov's principles. They didn't realise that a machine that manifests thought will also manifest nightmares. Their great machine unleashed the monsters from the id, and it wiped them out in a single night. The Krell built a god, and it destroyed them. But the humans, they built Robby. They hardwired him with limits and made him safe. And that's why in 1956, Robby was the robot that got AI right. Hollywood solved this problem 70 years ago. We just have to hope that Silicon Valley was paying attention. Thanks for watching.